Why are some of us born into families where love turns into control, tenderness gives way to rejection, and the child's truth is constantly stifled? Is it a cruel coincidence or a path imposed by a greater force? Behind the family chaos lies a disturbing but liberating truth. The most toxic environments sometimes become the training ground for the strongest souls. What if your pain was not a curse, but an initiation? What if the role you endured within your family was meant to reveal your true power? In this script, we will explore this reality through the wisdom of Carl Jung and the prism of spiritual awareness. Prepare yourself, because this journey is not only about suffering, but above all, about liberation and rebirth. We all grow up with the idea that family is supposed to be a refuge, a place where we find support and security. Yet for many, this image doesn't match reality. Behind closed doors, some families become spaces of oppression, where love is conditioned, tenderness is negotiated, and the truth is constantly invalidated. It's a subject we avoid discussing because it's uncomfortable, but it's an inescapable truth. Not all families protect, some destroy. A toxic family isn't simply a complicated family. It's a system where manipulation takes precedence over dialogue, where control replaces trust, where the child isn't recognized as an individual, but is reduced to an imposed role. These dynamics, whether visible or subtle, leave deep scars. They sculpt invisible but very real wounds. Shame, guilt, the fear of never being enough. Carl Jung spoke of family as the primary environment that shapes the soul. When this environment is unstable, it's not just childhood that is weakened, but also one's perception of oneself and the entire world. And therein lies the paradox. In this fragility, a different consciousness is also born. Those who survive a toxic climate develop a particular sensitivity, a lucidity that is disturbing, but also a strength. Talking about toxic families isn't about pointing fingers for the sake of pointing fingers. It's about naming a reality that many carry in silence. It's about shattering the illusion that everything's fine and acknowledging that for some, home has never been a sanctuary, but an emotional battleground. In every chaotic family, there's almost always one person designated to carry a burden that isn't theirs. They're the ones criticized more than others, the ones accused of exaggerating, the ones labeled too sensitive or too different. They're called the scapegoat. And if you've ever felt like the misunderstood one in your own home, you know exactly what that's like. The role of the scapegoat is brutal. It serves as a mirror to the tensions that the family refuses to see within itself. Rather than confront its wounds, the system projects them onto a single person. But this rejection is not random. It is often the one who sees the most clearly, who feels the most deeply, who becomes the target. Because their lucidity is disturbing. Because their truth threatens the fragile balance built on silence and denial. This role is painful, yes, but it also reveals something essential. You have always been different, not because you are the problem, but because you carry a conscience that others were not ready to face. Being rejected by those who should have loved you unconditionally forces you to look elsewhere for validation, and this is where a unique path begins, that of listening within. The scapegoat becomes the one who, despite suffering, discovers early on a truth that others run away from their entire lives. Your worth does not depend on applause or even family recognition. It exists within you, independent of the gaze of others. Carl Jung said that the privilege of life is to become who you truly are. But he also reminded us that this transformation doesn't come from comfort. It takes root in chaos. Being confronted with a toxic environment from childhood isn't an unjust punishment. It's a difficult initiation. It's the shadow that forces the light to reveal itself. When a child grows up without authentic recognition, when they have to survive rejection, humiliation, or manipulation, they learn to look elsewhere for a source of stability. And this source is not external. It does not come from family approval, but from a deeper place, the connection with the true self, what some call the soul, others God, or the universe. Toxicity, paradoxically, becomes the trigger for a spiritual awakening. Psychologically, this creates what Jung called a shadow confrontation. Wounds, pain, and contradictions become forces for inner exploration. We discover that personal worth does not depend on the role imposed by the family system. We learn that true love is not transactional, but is cultivated in inner sovereignty. What seems like weakness, sensitivity, difference, hyper-awareness, transforms into power. Because someone who has seen cruelty, who has felt exclusion, develops an empathy and clarity that comfort never produces. The toxic family, however destructive, thus becomes a kind of spiritual training ground. Pain does not destroy, it initiates, it shatters illusions, and pushes us to choose a truth greater than the one we have inherited. It is in this ordeal that the true path to individuation is outlined. Growing up in a toxic family means learning early on that survival isn't enough. At some point, you have to choose resistance. But this resistance doesn't always look like a visible rebellion. It begins with internal decisions that seem simple, but are, in reality, acts of liberation. The first weapon is the boundary. Understanding that protecting your inner space is not selfishness, but a spiritual duty. Saying no to what destroys your peace is not rejecting family. It is asserting yourself as a sovereign being. The boundary is an invisible wall that reminds you, I decide what enters my mind and what does not. The second weapon is the refusal of projections. In a toxic environment, you are labeled too sensitive, too dramatic, not strong enough. But these accusations rarely reflect who you are. They reveal what others refuse to see in themselves. To identify them as distorted mirrors rather than truths is to wrest the power others are trying to exert over you. The third weapon is the creation of new spaces. We don't always choose our family, but we can choose our circle. Finding people who recognize your value, who elevate your energy instead of depleting it, is not an option. It's a survival strategy. And if that circle is limited to a single person or even a virtual space, that's enough to break the isolation. These weapons are not just psychological, they are spiritual. They transform oppression into affirmation, rejection into clarity, pain into sovereignty. Being born into a toxic family isn't a cruel accident. It's a mission. The one labeled different, the one people try to silence, is often the one who carries the responsibility to break the cycles. Being the scapegoat doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're the one chosen to interrupt the legacy of silence, control, and pain. The mission of the chosen is not just to survive, it is to transform wounds into awareness, loneliness into clarity, sensitivity into strength. Where others repeat the same patterns generation after generation, you are the one who says, "This ends with me." And that decision is revolutionary. On a spiritual level, this is a pioneering role. You are the architect of a new inner order, founded on truth and not fear. On a psychological level, you become the silent model that proves it is possible to liberate oneself without repetition. And on a human level, you carry a gift, the ability to embody true love where it has never been offered. It's a demanding path because it doesn't promise applause. Those who are disturbed by your evolution will try to pull you back because your clarity exposes their illusions. But your role is not to convince them, it is to stand firm, to be the living example that one can be born in the shadows and choose the light. The chosen ones are not simply survivors, they are the pathfinders of a new world. And if you recognize this role in yourself, know this: your light is not just for you, it is for all who come after. Being born into a toxic family isn't a condemnation, it's a mission. This pain was never meant to diminish you, but to awaken you. You are the interruption of ancient cycles, the one who transforms the weight of hurt into light for future generations. But this transformation only happens if you dare to walk in your truth, even in the face of rejection. It is your sovereignty, it is your strength, and it is your contribution to the world. So remember, you are not defined by the prison you were born into, but by the freedom you choose to create. If this message resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, carry it, and become a beacon for other souls searching for truth. Your light is not only needed, it is expected.